Hi everyone, my name is Alexia Ward. I head up improvement at Sedex. I can introduce my colleagues as they walk on stage. This is Alex Sykes, who works with my team on improvement and has been heavily involved in building the SAQ with me, and Rebecca Toomey heads account management and will be here to answer questions towards the end. So, I'm here to talk to you about the SAQ, and what we'll cover is the purpose of the SAQ, so why members are using it, why we developed a new SAQ kind of rather than just updating a few questions or removing some questions, how the SAQ will work for different business types, what's different in this new SAQ and what will be staying the same. And then we'll run through the benefits for suppliers and buyers, and we'll have some time for questions towards the end. So, the Sedex self-assessment questionnaire is used for three reasons. Predominantly risk assessment, which Tom has just explained. It's also used for data collection and reporting for auditors and members managing their supply chains. And finally, it's used to enable and support supplier improvement. So we started this review in 2018 and really kept those three uses in mind during the whole review. We started with member consultation, and I know we've spoken to a few people in this room about the SAQ. We then also expanded it to do quite a bit of external expert consultation. So we spoke to improvement experts like Verite. We spoke to risk assessment experts, including Ergon and Maplecroft. We spoke to the likes of Oxfam and the WDI to kind of understand their investor perspective, and various other stakeholders as well. And then it was really important to us to include supplier perspectives. So we did lots of interviews, but we also ran a survey in 6 different languages, and about 300 suppliers gave their feedback on the SAQ. Throughout all that consultation, there was a really clear need for Sedex to redesign the tool in order to better deliver against these 3 needs. So, our members fed back a number of things that the new SAQ needed to do. Firstly, risk assessment. We needed to simplify and reduce the number of questions. We wanted to align to SMETA 6 and 6.1. We needed to incorporate more questions around gender, so looking at the worker profile, looking at women workers and migrants, and also building more responsible recruitment information. We wanted to make it more applicable to more sectors, and particularly service provider sectors and labour providers. We wanted to show improvement and change over time. And we also wanted to have a supplier output so that suppliers completing the SAQ then had something to see the information that they needed to do to improve and support on improvement as well. So I'll hand it over to Alex, who will run through the changes.
So I've had my head in a spreadsheet for about a year now, and it's really good to have the opportunity to explain what we've been doing, what our thinking is behind it, ready for the SAQ launch in next year. So it starts off with your site profile. Your site profile is what you create when you join Sedex, and it has all the information about your company. Within that, Tim mentioned it earlier about ISIC, so you'll have an ISIC code, and that ISIC code is what will say your sector is. And we're using ISIC this time around because it gives you much greater detail that can feed into the risk tool. Your ISIC code, let's say, give an example, is grain of grapes. That will then automatically populate what your SAQ is. We have 4 different types of SAQs: goods providers, service providers, agents, and labour providers. They all ask slightly different things but run down a similar structure. So if you're a goods provider, you're going to be asked questions about your site as well as your supply chain. If you're a service provider, you don't really have a site, so you're going to be asked questions at your head office level and how you manage, say for example, you're a cleaning company, how you manage your workers who are out working remotely, as well as your supply chain management. Agents don't really have workers, so the focus for you will be on your supply chain management. And then finally, labour providers. The focus here will be on the workers that you have operating at customer sites. So previously, or how it works currently with the sector-specific information, such as agriculture, and we have an agriculture types of questions that feed into the current SAQ. That is going to be covered off. Sector-specific stuff is going to be covered off in the risk assessment tool. The SAQ will populate your business type. So if you're still following me, a bit more detail about how it works. Here we've got the structure on our 6 different sections. So you start by talking about your business. You'll then be asked about your policies and resources you have in place. That then flows into your processes. Then you'll look at your data that you monitor and track over time before going into talking about what training you offer and improvement projects that you have in place. And then finally, you talk about how you manage your supply chain. So it has a very logical flow. Some changes that we've made, and just to explain them, the current SAQ works quite heavily in a yes-no format. So we ask the question, do you do X, Y, Z? And the answer is yes or no. Very easy to answer, but doesn't always provide the information that we're looking for. So we've moved away from that, and now we provide a bit more of multiple choice. So instead of saying, do you do this, it will say, what do you do around this? You'll have 5 or 6 different options. Now, one of those options, and it pretty much runs throughout the entire SAQ, is I don't know. And you'll see it everywhere. And the reason we put that in is because when we did, Alexia mentioned the supplier survey. When we did that supplier survey, we found out that a lot of questions were being left blank and unanswered, which is fine, but people obviously need an option to just say that they don't know. And it gives a much better understanding of what's going on at that site. We also have data to be collected much more disaggregated by gender. So a lot more questions now are broken down by male and female. And some examples of that we just put is absenteeism and turnover rates and how many members are in your worker committee. And then finally, the point down the bottom, which is really exciting, completely new thing we're doing, which is offering or inputting guidance into the SAQ. Guidance works in a number of different ways. So as you come to each section, it will say what you're going to be asked about, potentially who you might want to contact to help answer it. So if it's a section on wages, we'll recommend that you speak to your HR department. Also, a lot of the terminology is quite difficult to understand. It might get lost a little bit in translation. So we have tooltips where you can hover over certain questions or answers, and it will explain what we're trying to ask and just give you a bit more detail and hopefully make it easier to answer for suppliers. So this just gives you an example of a few different types of questions that we're going to be asking. So we're going to be looking to ask questions about your business, i.e. which countries are you sourcing from, and if you're a goods provider, how many production buildings do you have on site? We're then going to be asking questions about your workers. Which contracts do you use at your sites? What are the nationalities of your workers? Which methods do you use to pay workers? And then we're also going to be asking about how you manage your risk. So do you review the practices of labour providers that you use? And another example is how many grievances have been raised in the past 12 months? A lot of change, but a lot still the same. We have aligned this SAQ of our 4 SMETA pillars of labour, business ethics, health and safety and environment. It's still going to be hosted in Sedex Advanced, same location, the same functionality remains. And from a translation perspective, it will be launched in the same 13 languages that we currently use it. So I know what you're going to ask me next, which is it longer or shorter than the current one? It depends. It's dynamic. So what that means is you will trigger questions based upon the complexity of your site. And to try and break that down for you, and what I'm saying there is if you have labour providers, you'll be asked questions on labour providers and how you manage them. So, and I'll go into a little bit more detail on that, but this just gives you a rough idea of our question number count. And you can see how it varies. I talked about the 4 different business types. You can see how it varies massively across the 4 different business types and your maximum and minimum. The minimum is if you don't have any of these protocols in place, you'll be asked a core set of minimum questions. If you've got everything in place and you're doing lots of things and you can show off lots of improvement as well to your buyers, then you'll be asked the maximum amount of questions. So the maximum isn't always a bad thing. You get asked more, you might have to do more, but you'll be able to show off more to your buyers and provide more information. I'm going to go a level deeper than that. So these are our sections, and this shows you the question numbers that you can be asked within each section. An example of what I'm trying to say, if you look at, let's go for processes, the third section down, you could be asked 63 questions if you have everything in place. You could be asked as little as 34. What I mean by that is, if I said, do you use labour providers? And you said no, skip through to the next bit. If you do, you'll be asked several questions on what your labour providers are, how you manage them. And another example maybe is environment. Do you manage your environmental impact? If you say yes, you'll then need to go into detail and explain what you do around water, waste, biodiversity impact, energy, pollution. If you don't manage your environmental impact, you'll move on to the next section. The training and improvement and monitoring tracking sections you can see are quite largely different. So monitoring, tracking, or let's go for training improvement, that's quite a good example. The improvement questions are set out to detail improvement projects. And what I mean by that is, if I said to you, do you have any improvement projects in place? And you said yes. The questions that would then come up would be, where's your project? Where's it located? How many people is it impacted? How do you ensure it remains a success? So that's why I just wanted to explain the difference between the numbers of minimum and maximum being so severe. It's not necessarily 46 more questions. It's we're asking for detail within 3 or 4 questions, perhaps.
While we were working on the SAQ, we were really thinking about how to bring out benefits for suppliers. And Alex was just explaining the question numbers. So if you are a supplier and you do a lot of work on training and improvement, you track lots of KPIs, you will get an output report called the Management Controls Report at the moment, which will show you where you are and how you are controlling risk and labour standards, environmental standards at your site. So if you are pretty advanced and you're putting in a lot of work on that, you'd expect to see your SAQ answered scores, and you'd expect to see more greens because you're managing and you're kind of on top of management controls at your site. Whereas if, for example, you are really strong on policies, you've just hired a member of staff to work on environment, but you haven't really started working on processes, you haven't started tracking data yet, you'd expect to see sort of maybe a green in policy and resources. You might have sort of a yellowy colour in processes, and then you'd be kind of expecting to go towards orange and red towards the end of that report. You'll get that report across all the elements if you're a good supplier or if you're a service provider, but for agents, you'll see that report only on supply chain management because that's kind of the critical piece of information for your type of business. And similarly with the labour providers, you'll see the labour elements, but you won't be asked questions, for example, on environmental management. So this report will then be linked. So this will tell you what you need to do to improve. This will then be linked with the new supplier workbook, which will explain why improvement will benefit your business and also how to improve. So we'll talk you through those steps. The new supplier workbook will be much easier to use, and it will kind of go into more practical detail and explain how to do various elements at your site. So that's the output that you'll see, and then as Tom was explaining, that report will also be shown to your buyers. So as you improve and as you save the SAQ, that will be saved. Then you might go into it 3 months later, update a few things. You will then be able to see the improvement that you've made, and your customers will be able to see that too. And as Alex was saying, a lot of the questions really are there to kind of allow people who are doing a lot to show off to their customers and explain the work that they're doing and get credit and recognition for that. Because one of the key things that suppliers were saying to us was, well, we do lots and lots and lots, but in the SAQ, we just come out the same as everyone else. So we wanted to make that differentiation and allow that difference between suppliers who are kind of doing the basics and those that are really going above and beyond. So suppliers now get an output report. They can show improvement to customers, and the SAQ is easier to complete with the I don't know questions, answers, and also guidance on how to complete the SAQ. And then benefits for buyers. So one of the key benefits will be the risk assessment that comes out of the SAQ and the ability to see improvement in your supply chain and differentiate between your suppliers and really understand who's engaged and who's going above and beyond. A really big benefit will be that the SAQ can be used for service providers and other sectors. So currently the SAQ is very site-based. It asks questions about workers on site, but the new SAQ will do on a business level. So if you have lots of workers in different customer sites, you'll be able to answer questions on that and be able to see what you need to do to. The supplier workbook guidance will also apply to service providers, so that will be relevant to service provider suppliers as well. We will collect much more gender disaggregated information, which has been a key request from a lot of members, and it will help support reporting for organisations like Oxfam, like the Workforce Disclosure Initiative, who we consulted during this build to make sure that some of the questions that they are asking of brands are incorporated here, so you can use the SAQ to collect information for that. I will hand over to Rebecca, who can talk about the transition, and then she'll be here to answer questions from everyone. Not all the questions, hasten to add.
Thank you. So at the moment, we have the Maplecroft tool in place. I think really as the kind of representative from the account management team, we just wanted to reiterate the transition from one tool to another. We recognise that we are changing a lot of things, and this is going to be have quite a big impact for all of you. So with that in mind, it's already been mentioned, but you will have visibility of the old tools and the old information for a period of 12 months. Before launch, you'll have the use of your account managers to support you in preparing for the changes. So what will these changes mean for your business? What communications will you need to do internally? We recognise that some of you might have already put in budgets and things for your programmes for 2020, and it may not, or it may have already included the resource to support these changes. But if you need help from the teams to kind of present this to senior management and get internal buy-in and explain what those changes actually mean and how and what support you need, then the account management team will be happy to support with that. For the rollout and launch, we're also aware that many of you will be getting questions from suppliers, and the sessions this afternoon with Rebecca will enable us to think about in a bit more detail what exactly is it that you need. What communications do you need? Where do those communications need to
Hi, this is Claudine from the Bund. Would it be possible to have questions that are answered on a global or corporate level for goods providers as well?
Yeah, so the SAQ is split into two sections. So one is kind of we'll ask about your policies and procedures, and you can complete that at head office level. The functionality that's currently in place with the global SAQ will stay, and if you have policies and procedures that apply to, or policies that apply to all sites or certification, that will then spread to your other sites.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, Emily Brennan from Arch Advisors, and I just had a question with the new SAQ. Will it be back to being a finding on the audits for suppliers if they don't complete it in advance? And also maybe just some feedback to make it more user-friendly for suppliers that aren't as familiar with the Sedex Advanced, to highlight their need to complete the SAQ.
Should I say that one? So yeah, take your second question first. There will be a sign when you log on to Sedex that you need to update your site profile information and your SAQ information on launch. So suppliers should be directed to do that. With your question about audit, to be honest, I'm not sure. Do you know, Rebecca? No. If it will say on your audit, I will look into that, and we can include that in the FAQs that we will publish to share around.
Hello. Right. Roger Conan from Conchitaro. One question. If a site has a valid certification for something like ISO 14001 or something like that, would it allow them to skip the other questions because it's in place, or would you still have to go through the other questions to show how you cover it?
This is working. Oh yeah. You wouldn't be skipping anything. So you can select your ISO certification. You would upload a copy of it, but you would still carry on answering the rest of the questions that in the certification section, because they cover slightly different elements. Picking one certification wouldn't necessarily cover that whole section.
Also, you'd want to do that because then in the buyer view of your site, you're likely to have be quite high performing across the elements, so that will then show so that your customers can see that.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Hi, it's Effie from SGS. Are you going to make it easier for the self-assessment to be shared with the auditors so that they can be preparing better for the audits, and also will there be the possibility to comment in the final report on how accurate the SAQ was against what we've seen on site?
Both those questions are currently in consideration. So we're going to be launching the SAQ first, and then as that starts being completed, we'll then start looking at how we can build that information, make it available to auditors, and make that useful for you. And we're also thinking about how and whether to share some of the risk reports as well. So that's definitely on the agenda.
Dion from Sainsbury's. Just linking up with that point, actually. I'm just thinking future-proofing this. The idea that if SAQ questions and verified audit information don't match, that in itself would be an indicator of risk moving forward. So I know that there's an ability to save things, but I just think that if there is a way to save that mismatch, and then moving forward, does that mismatch then close, would be really helpful from a customer perspective.
Yes, and that's the way we're going. So with there's a lot of work being done on the overall data framework of all the different data points that Sedex will be capturing and how they all speak to each other. That is a fundamental piece of work that Magali will be working on over the next 6 months and will be built into Connect. So it's absolutely essential, and it probably won't happen now, but it will happen.
It's just the tech side. I don't understand that.